Well, welcome to the podcast, Amy.
Thank you, Jack. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me.
No, it's good. Well, I'm glad that we've got a chance to have a good old chat because we've met a couple of times, haven't we? I think Bird Fair, I've bumped into you,
Yes, usually in muddy tents and
yeah, Network for
the like.
Nature, the other one, which I know you've
Yes,
got
yeah.
a finger or two in that. So it's nice to just have a good old chat with it all. But I think what I'll start with is some of the books that I say books because there is more than one that you're working on, and one of them I believe is coming out this year is on trees. Is that right?
Yes, I've literally just been looking at proofs of it today. It's called A Tree a Day, and it follows on from a couple of others. One was called A Cloud a Day, and another A Bird a Day, which Dom Cousins wrote. Uh, so I'm following in some big shoes there.
Yeah. So with trees, one of the common things people always talk about is carbon offsetting, and I just
Mm.
wondered if you've done any research into it. In that, is it as simple that you can jet set as long as you plant a couple of trees, or am I
Oh well,
oversimplifying
a
it?
lot more than a couple. I think there's various ways of offsetting carbon, but basically, the offsetting is it's a financial sort of it's a financial process, isn't it? Offsetting rather than necessarily a direct one. It doesn't necessarily mean that X number of trees will be planted,
Yeah.
um, and the whole idea of planting trees as a carbon sink obviously it has some basis in science, but it is contentious because the trees, if you're going to plant trees, they need to be planted in the right place. There's another school of thought that says that actually allowing trees to regenerate naturally is far better than planting them. And because planting trees, there's plantations and there's forest or semi-natural, forest, and they're very different creatures. So if you're paying to just have tree factories installed on land that maybe isn't appropriate, then tree farms rather on land that isn't appropriate, then that has potential to be far more damaging in climate terms and biodiversity terms. So yeah, we have to be careful about what we're doing, and there are other ways to create carbon sinks. The
Okay.
oceans are fantastic carbon sinks, and so grassland, and so are peat bogs. I mean, there's just
Yeah. Ponds are as well, aren't they?
nature is very good at sequestering carbon in general. So it doesn't all have to be about trees, much as I love trees.
Yeah, and I suppose the simple answer would be if you can help it, don't go halfway across the world is
Yeah,
probably the easiest solution,
yeah,
isn't it? And I think
absolutely.
if COVID's taught us anything, there's a lot of things you can do from your living room or from your
Yeah, there
office
are
or
things that you really need to travel for, possibly to do,
yeah,
and others that you don't. I mean, my global traveling has been drastically curtailed. I've done one long haul in 10 years, um, and then I think the only other flight I took in those 10 years was to the Isles of Scilly. So it wasn't a that was
No, I don't think anyone's going to begrudge you for
extreme
that.
short haul. But we will fly again. We will go long haul again. But I would be more inclined, because it would be doing it, to go and travel and see wildlife. It would be more making it, a real highlight of a decade sort of trip. Maybe take longer over it, join several trips together.
Yeah,
You can do the long haul and then maybe travel around an area a bit more. And that's something that we'd love to do as a family. And we're kind of waiting until the boy's old enough to really appreciate it.
yeah.
So I'm far from saying I will never, never fly again, but just doing it thoughtfully and looking into whatever offsetting is appropriate. And
Yeah. Well, I kind of agree with you when you're saying like to make the most of it. Like I'd love to do Australia. That's one of my top places. And I thought if I'm going to go to Australia, I might as well do New Zealand. And if you're going to go
yeah,
there, you might as well do Tasmania or whatever. So all these kind of emerging islands and maybe see a thylacine if I'm very lucky, as we've just been.
well, God, yes, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
As where I should just give that some context because as the time of recording, there may have been a thylacine recorded, which would be very very exciting. Although we'll probably know by the time this comes out, but at the minute we still are on tender hooks.
Yes, I was literally watching that video when this Zoom call started. So you found me a bit of a gibbering.
Yeah, we were. Yeah. Well, you never know. By the end of this Zoom call, we might have found out
Oh
what
God,
it
yeah,
was, but that would be
yeah.
pretty amazing, wouldn't it? Your other book that you're still working on is, you have to forgive me the title, but it's on rivers, isn't it? Is it
It is,
Swim
yes. It's
Free or
called The
something?
Flow,
The Flow, that was
Return to
it.
the River. So
That was it.
yes, that one was due to be finished by now, but then the pandemic jumped in and put paid to a lot of the field work I had planned, and also, brought lockdown schooling into my life.
Yeah.
With that, which basically is not, excuse my dog barking.
There's been many dogs on this podcast, so yeah, don't worry.
But yes, so schooling has had to take precedence over writing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that book is delayed by a year, but it is what it is.
Be worth it when it comes out, I'm
life
sure.
In 2021, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And have you done any wild swimming for the book? Have you done any of that as part of it?
Well, I do what wild swim, or I do swim in the wild.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's necessarily for the book, but it's
no. Okay.
It's a way of experiencing rivers. The sort of the reason I wanted to write about rivers particularly was that I used to do a lot of whitewater kayaking, so that used to be the way I engaged with rivers. They were all, fast and steep and foaming, and we saw plenty of wildlife doing that. One of the great things about that kind of kayaking is it gets you access into parts of rivers that there's no other way into. So gorges and the like. So some absolutely magical places. But yeah, that it's a pretty hardcore sport to do at any serious level. Doesn't mix very well with family life.
No.
So I don't really do that anymore. But I missed the river, hugely, and so I started looking into other ways of being with rivers. So that did involve swimming, or just walking by them, or canyoning, or even snorkeling, which is something that I've started going under the water, which it will be no surprise to you to hear me say, oh my god, it's just an experience. The first time I actually put my face under with a mask on. I dived in the sea, but never in the rivers, and this, particularly in some of the chalk rivers around here, which are fantastically clear.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience to being in the sea, and just being in a river is just to excuse the phrase, but go with the flow, and what going along the current is fantastic. And if people ever have a chance to snorkel in a river, I know access, and I'm going to come on to that in a second actually, but access can be tricky, but I definitely recommend it. It's a phenomenal experience, and I think everyone should give it a go if they can.
Definitely. It's yes, absolutely blew my mind.
So how did you find access to rivers? And it's something I constantly get asked about, but I just wondered, like with say some of your local Yorkshire chalk streams, were people happy to let you get in, or was there a bit of kind of?
Well, yeah, I mean, the ones that I've snorkeled in was on one of the newer nature reserves, and I did have explicit permission to be there, particularly with chalk streams. They are so fragile, and I would hate to be someone that was sort of initiating a whole new sort of leisure activity of let's all go and jump in your nearest chalk river, because that could be really damaging. They are incredibly delicate habitats, so I was moving around in the river as little as possible with any of my body on the doing what I call crocodiling. I don't know if that's a technical term. Floating, but just using my hands, my fingers really, to just sort of hodl along on the gravel. So not standing in it, certainly not walking around or trampling in it, just letting my body float and just steering a little bit with my hands.
No, I think that's definitely the way to go. I think people always think, well, you got your fins kick.
Yeah,
but often, no, you kind of, crocodile. I'm going to use that. That's a good term.
So facing upstream to just sort of hold position, and using the bigger rocks to sort of hang on to in the shallow water. But then, like you described, just drift snorkel down, just go with the flow, and that it's. Well, I likened it to being in a flight simulator when it's quite shallow water and you get that really kind of close view, and you're just zooming over this underwater landscape.
It's pretty amazing.
You feel like you're going really fast, even if
you do. Yeah, I think in terms, what I found with access anyway is that because someone will, if it's in England anyway, someone will own the banks, the access to it, and it's just a case of just asking. I think people just don't like surprise, particularly if it's an angling club. They're not going to appreciate people bubbling around. But I think if you explain what you're trying to do, they might say no, but at least you've asked, you know. So
yeah, well, it was a problem, and it is a problem with kayaking. Definitely, there are challenges to access, with big problems with lack of access to rivers in Britain. Of the rivers that could technically be kayaked, only about 2% have rights of access. So because navigable rivers technically are navigable was back in the day when we were thinking about big boats, not little kayaks, which technically a kayak can go down pretty much anything. So a lot of the rivers that you might want to kayak on don't have an automatic right. In England anyway, it's different in Scotland. They have much more sensible access.
Rights to roam and etc.
Yes.
Yeah.
So their rights to roam cover rivers. In England, it's much more tricky and very limited in where you can paddle and when. So the kayaking season is in the winter, when sort of November to March, when the fishermen aren't.
Isn't it something to do with the height of the river as well? Is it that there's a certain height
in some
where you?
Cases,
is it okay?
In some cases, the rivers have the access agreement is you can paddle it when it's above a certain level.
Yeah.
That you're not scraping along, disturbing the bed and the gravels and that sort of thing, which is sensible. That's a common sense approach.
Yeah.
But there's the other approach that says, well, I'm making money from license fees, rob fees, or I pay to fish here, and so no one else should be allowed. So there is friction there, unfortunately, but not in other countries. So that suggests to me that it's a social problem rather than a
yeah. I mean,
you go paddling in the Alps or in Scotland, and you get a cheery wave from the fishermen you go by, and it's a different experience. So yeah, it can be done. We just need to find a way of bringing everyone.
Compromise, I suppose, at the end of the day.
I just think there are more than one ways to appreciate a river, and why can't we all have a bit of that?
Yeah, it's a great resource. So we should, be good to try it out. You mentioned the 2 books, and I wondered, because obviously you're quite a prolific nature writer. So how do you pick stories when you're pitching to magazines or newspapers like The Guardian or whatever? Like, do they come to you and say, we want you to do a story on XYZ, or are you like, actually, I found this amazing little story, are you interested?
It's probably about half and half, to be honest.
Is it? Okay.
I mean, with books as well, a lot of the more kind of straight natural history books I've written in the past have been ones that the publishers come to me saying, oh, we'd like to do a book on this, that and the other, and would you write it for us? So it's only really in the last few years where I've started doing a lot more creative nature writing that it's become more personal and more something that, it would work the other way around, where I'll pitch an idea to a publisher.
It must be quite nice if you've got a publisher coming to you. It means you're doing something right, doesn't it?
It is nice, yeah, but it also means they tell you what to write and how long it's going to be.
Okay.
That sort of thing. So in terms of creativity, you have a much less creative control over the end product. But it's still, I'm a freelancer, so it's nice to be asked. Work is always good. But yeah, the books that have the book that has my heart at the moment is the one that's all mine. Yeah, it's also the most stressful.
Yeah, well, I guess you want to make it right, don't you?
Yeah, it's putting yourself on the page, and whereas other if it's more factual, not that the creative nature writing isn't factual, but if it's a much more straight traditional natural history book, there are only so many ways of getting that information across.
Yes, yeah.
But because my background is science, I was a biologist, and so that accuracy and that sort of that rigorous scientific approach was really, really important. And it's, as I say, it's only more recently that I've started writing about nature in a much more personal way, much more emotional way. And I love doing it. I realised that this is probably the sort of writing I should have been doing all those years. but you know, it takes a while to work out what what is your thing.
So is it important to develop your own style of writing then, you think?
Um, wow, I have several styles, and it depends who I'm
Okay.
writing. So I wouldn't, you know, I certainly don't always write the same way. You know, you take one voice writing for different age groups, for example, or for I'd write in a different style. I do a column for British wildlife, so that has quite a different voice to something I would be writing, you know, in my more creative nature writing, to the River book, for example, or the country diaries I do for the Guardian, which are a bit more sort of waxing lyrical.
Yeah.
And then the straight natural history, more kind of encyclopedic information, or the books that I do for publishers like Dorling Kindersley, where it's, you know, incredibly information rich, but in tiny little chunks, so glorified captions almost, that have to summarize, you know, evolution or photosynthesis or, you know, some complex process in 27 words precisely, because that's the space they've given you. So yeah, very, you know, very different. But it's a bit like acting. I quite enjoy the taking it on a different voice and going with that.
Well, it's good that you're versatile, I guess, as well, because then
Yeah, it
people
helps.
can come to you with, you know, with lots of different. I mean, my I wouldn't describe. I can write words. I wouldn't describe myself as a writer, just because I don't know. I've done books and
Yeah,
magazine
well, therefore
articles.
you were right.
I suppose so, by definition, I guess. But I feel much more
Yeah, that's
comfortable.
interesting. I have the same sort of hesitation in calling myself a naturalist, or I did for a lot of years. I do now,
Okay.
but for years I didn't quite fit the image in my head that I had of a naturalist, which is ridiculous. So yeah.
Well, a naturalist. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you probably know the definition. Isn't it? It's just someone who's interested in nature, isn't it? It's not. It's not a
Yeah,
formal.
basically,
It's not
yes.
a formal
Yeah.
degree or anything. You don't have to have a degree to be a naturalist. Is
No,
just someone who
no.
likes nature, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. So I had to have a word with myself, really, because I
Yeah.
was, you know, the naturalist in my head was, you know, someone like Oliver Rackham, or, you know, this sort of an older male
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
with a butterfly net or something, you know.
Beard.
to Yeah, I just had to realize that, no, that is me.
Yeah. I think there shouldn't be a stereotype. I guess should there? Anyone can
I think
be.
I just didn't feel I knew enough, but
Okay.
I think if a naturalist is anything, it's someone that knows they don't know enough about nature.
Okay. That's a good way of putting it.
The more you learn, the more you realize, just, you know, it's hopeless. We'll never ever know it all.
No,
That's,
definitely.
you know, literally every day there is something else out there to go and
So
stem.
how long did it take you then before you feel like you've made it in writing then? Because if you started off as a scientist and then you turned your hand to writing and made it, might, I know if you don't like to self glorify, but like at what point were you like, oh, this, maybe there's a career in this?
Um, well, I guess I've been making I've been making a living doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the first time you get something that's got your name on it and it's in print, that's good. So I guess, you know, in some ways, as a writer, after my first year of freelance, and I, you know, hadn't starved or lost
It's always a
my
bonus,
head,
isn't
I
it?
thought,
Yeah.
okay, this is all right.
Yeah.
I can just about make it work. But in terms of being, you know, in terms of calling myself a writer and feeling that it was going okay, I don't know. I think probably in the last 3 or 4 years, where I felt like I'm writing the kind of thing I really want to write, it's the work of my heart now, and other people seem to enjoy it. So, you know, I can't ask more than that.
No, definitely.
But I'm still, you know, I'm still completely, you know, I still get giddy when anyone gives me a nice comment on Twitter. It's still, you know, just I go like that little blushing emoji. You know, you know, it'll never. You'll never be quite certain. Everything I file, I'm thinking, oh, you know, got that right, or have I overdone it, or underdone it, or yeah. So I think that's a thing with writing. You could always tweak and tweak and tweak and go back. So that's what deadlines are for, to stop us obsessing over, you know, endless revision.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to Bird Fair and seeing, I think it was Mark Carradine did a field. I said field guides are the worst books to do because undoubtedly, like the following year, something will get
Yeah.
renamed or they'll reclassify something or they'll find out a new species, and yeah, so it's like you can
It's out of
obsess.
date before before the ink's even dry.
Yeah, and in some
Yeah,
cases they
yeah,
are, aren't they? So
yeah,
they are a nightmare to do in that regard. So yeah, I guess you can't obsess over it too much. You just have to do what you can and
exactly.
put it
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
Put it out.
exactly. So it's it's as good as you can make it at the time you were making it, and if it's more kind of new nature writing, then it's as true as you can make it. It's how you felt about whatever it was at the time. Um,
So when you say new nature writing, is this the sort of what's the best way to describe it? H is for hawk, that sort of stuff. Is that what you're
well,
talking about?
that's usually given as the benchmark where new
Yeah.
nature
Okay.
kind of began, and it is this sort of blend of nature, but it's very sort of experiential and through the eye of the beholder and the mind and the life of the beholder. So everything, um, I guess it's that back to that sort of everything is connected trope, in that in some way my life is connected to everything that's out there, and everything that's out there is connected to me because it makes me feel this way or it makes me behave this way. Um, so so I
Yeah.
think it's quite true to how we experience nature, and the popularity of it suggests that
I
these writers
guess
are not alone in the way they feel.
I guess the nice thing with it is, let's say you read H's for Hawk or Butterfly Isles or whatever. You don't have to love butterflies or hawks or whatever. It's that journey that person's making that can grip you, isn't it? So I suppose that's
That's a
maybe what.
gateway, which it will be for lots of people to to other nature. And I know there are plenty of people for whom it's just a turn off, and they want their books about nature to be just that, to be straight, informative, descriptive for sure, but keep all the all the emotional stuff out of it, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
there already were plenty of that sort of book, and they're still being produced. So so new nature writing as a genre, fills a different sort of a different need that readers seem to have, or a different desire that readers have to connect or to feel connected. And to be honest, I don't worry about it too much. What it's called, it's for publishers and marketeers to decide.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, it's the role of a writer to just write.
Yeah,
And
of course, yeah.
in the box.
Yeah.
It is convenient shorthand for those sorts of books, where there's something more and other to it than just a book of information.
Yeah, no, I think so. And like you say, if it's a bit of a gateway drug into nature,
Yes,
then why not? Let's
then
go
it's a
for
good
it.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
exactly. And I was reading up about some of the other bits I've done. You've done some nature friendly farming, or kind of corresponded on that. And it might sound counterproductive to some people, because to some, nature and farming don't necessarily get along. But as has been proven, the two can coexist, can't they?
Mm. Absolutely. I mean, farming is nature.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
that,
yeah.
humanity is nature, and farming is one of the chief ways that we engage with nature. We're going out and feeding ourselves. That's all we're doing. That's all, and that's what every other animal on the planet has to do, in some way. And farming is a large part of our way of doing it. Certainly, in the developed world, there's not many of us that will go out, and forage, or hunt for our every meal. I mean, you could do it, but the vast majority of us don't. So we've substituted farming for that, and it's made us who we are. As a species. A huge part of our social development is because we settled down, we learned to cultivate crops, and we had homes because of it. We stopped being nomadic, um, and so civilizations grew up, towns, villages, cities. Um, so so much comes back to farming that we can't undo it. But it's really only in the last few decades where the intensification of it, has escalated exponentially to the extent where it's just it is unsustainable, wholly unsustainable. Um, so we have to find a way back, and, and work with nature and allow nature in. And those farmers that are doing it are finding that they can, they can share their land with wildlife. And certainly, I've got I live in a farming area, so I've got lots of
Yeah.
neighbours. and one of them in particular, in the last 5 years or so, has started trying more nature-friendly farming and leaving space for wildlife on his farm. And just seeing his sort of journey and his joy at discovering and realizing that the birds he's seeing are there because of the way he's managing the land, it's fantastic. And he's totally won over by it. And I think that's the thing about nature. Once you've got a little bit of it, you want more and you want more. So gateway drugs, definitely. A bit of gateway nature drug would, is definitely a good thing.
Yeah.
It will help us all. And that's, so that old sort of idea of mixed farming, can be hugely beneficial for nature. There's plenty of farmers proving that. And that means animals as well. That does mean livestock. So the whole, although I about once a year, because I like it, but it's very much a treat and a sort of celebratory thing. I'm not suggesting everyone else should adopt that. People do what they feel, but we do need to find a way of eating the amount of meat and dairy that can be produced in a sustainable, biodiversity enhancing, carbon sequestering way, which, on this small island, because it should be local as well, on this small island of Great Britain, is less than we currently consume as a population. So there's an equation there where it will all balance.
Yeah. Well, I've tried to go vegetarian this month just to see how I get on. And so far, I'm not having any problems. I'm not going to say I'll be vegetarian forever, but I'm trying to get to the point where I have more vegetarian meals than meat. I don't think I'd ever not stop eating meat completely, because I like eating meat. But if everyone ate less meat, it would help a lot. I think the trouble, I'll be careful how I say this. The trouble with veganism is it's almost like the hard sell. It's like no meat, no dairy, boom, and a lot of people are going to push back against that. Whereas if you're like, well, look, just try it for a couple of days a week, or meatless Monday is how I started, just one day a week. And then I found, I actually quite enjoy some of these meals. So I upped it to 2 days a week. And I'm currently on 3 days. And the hope is to get to 4, maybe even 5, and maybe just have meat at the weekends as a treat. And that's that. And you imagine if everyone did that, it'd make a huge difference, I
think that's an entirely reasonable journey. And I think, but at the same time, if we're looking at this overall sort of equation for balancing our diet as a nation, then if some people want to eat no meat at all, or no animal-based products at all, then that's fine. That helps the balance in some way. But for their health, they need to be not eating too many processed meals, which there are an awful lot of for diets that exclude meat and dairy. There's a lot of processed food, and there's a lot of imported food, and there's a lot of food that's, if you're switching from dairy, I don't drink milk anymore, dairy milk. I drink oat milk. Some of the other alternatives, it's almond milk or soy milk. There are concerns over those.
Environmentally they're not much better,
but at least oats can be grown here, so you can't do it all. There's just so much pressure to
there is
every little micro decision as a consumer you can agonize over, and it could drive you mad, but there are obvious steps that you can take, and just considering it a little bit more and just trying to live a little bit more lightly, and buy there's a fantastic farmer not far from me who's absolutely busting a gut to do the right thing, and he's a beef farmer, beef and dairy, on the Derwent, on the river I live on, further down on the Derwent Ings, which is a fantastic area for birds, triple SI designated, and his cattle graze in the summer on the Ings, but in the winter those areas are completely underwater, so it's part of flood management for the whole region, and it's brilliant for the birds, and for the sort of meadow flora that come there. And he's absolutely great, but it's really hard to do the right thing. He's under constant pressure to from both sides, from conservationists,
I know,
environmentalists, radical vegans who don't want anything to do with the fact that he rears cattle, and farmers on the other hand, and he's just such a voice of reason, So it, it behoves all of us to actually listen to those voices in what I call the messy middle, and give them credit for trying to do
Yeah,
trying to feed us and look after the land and encourage biodiversity. It's a pretty thankless task if we can't actually say well done and support them. So yes, last time I ate beef was actually the Christmas before last, but it was his. So I thought, right, well done, Rob. You are going to eat meat. So we had some of his Dexter beef, and it was delicious.
No, I bet it was. And you touched on it a little bit there, but obviously you're living in North Yorkshire. Well, what's the wildlife like locally for you? Have you got much to see from your, I say from your doorstep, but in your local area?
Yeah, literally from my doorstep. We're very lucky. We live just on the edge of the Castle Howard estate, which is between York and Scarborough in the Howardian Hills. And our house is kind of a bit out of the village, so literally, I can go for a walk around the woods in my pajamas in the mornings. Yeah, we live just opposite the woods. So yeah, we are incredibly fortunate, particularly in the last year. I've never felt so blessed to live where we do. It's a bit of an expedition to go and do anything else, but yeah, it's pretty special for wildlife. And the estate is in the process of as many large landowners are, looking at ways to make more space for nature, do little bits of ecological restoration. I mean, like I say, it's already pretty good for wildlife, but they're looking at ways of doing more. And all credit to them, they are progressive and they have an eye on the it's a big tourist attraction as well, the estate. So the house.
Oh, okay.
It was where Brideshead Revisited was filmed, so it has a 250,000 visitors a year, something like that, to the house and the gardens, and then the big estate's very popular with walkers. So they're aware that people are interested in concepts like rewilding and might come to visit for that as well as for the more traditional country estate side of things. So they're canny. They also know that agricultural subsidies are going to be changing, and public goods are going to be something a big factor in that. So yeah, there's a financial incentive as well, but basically they just want to do the right thing with this land that they are custodians of, which is very commendable. And I think there are a lot of large landowners that are coming around to that way of thinking, particularly the younger ones. I think that's
yeah. Well, it's good to know that you've got stuff on your doorstep, whether it's your pajamas or your walking boots, and you can kind of get stuck into that and get some good views. Well, I mean, that pretty much brings me to the end of it. So it's been great to kind of get a glimpse into your varied career of writing and all that world. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Amy.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Fair, hopefully.
Well, I mean, dare we dream that it might be in person? I don't know. Hopefully it will be, but
who knows?
We'll see. But
one day soon.
Take care.
Will do. Bye for now.